Great. Thank you, everyone, for coming to our conversation today. I'm Susanna Snyder, and this is Samantha Russell. And we're going to be talking about how it is more difficult than ever to get audiences to click on a call to action like a social media link in a social media post. Samantha has said that their traditional marketing funnel is dead, yet most advisors are still marketing like it's 1999.
Name that song.
So let's get into it. Can you just talk about kind of the marketing realities of 2022? What's happening today? What does the landscape look like that's different?
Yes. So, and I do have some slides here. I don't know if you actually can see them, so I'm going to pretend like you can't, but they're there. And if anybody wants me to send them to you afterwards, just let me know. But if you think about any of your own experiences, right? So you go on to Google and you ask Google a question, something like, when's the earliest I can claim Social Security? Or what age do babies normally sleep through the night? Something I just Googled myself recently. Then they're going to give you an answer without you having to click anything, right? Who here has had this happen to them? Like, show of hands. You Google something and without needing to click anything, Google just gives you the answer, right? This is zero-click search. So we've known about zero-click searches for a while, but actually the same thing has started to happen across all the platforms we all use. So if you're on, Twitter, which I'm sure many of you are, you will notice a lot more threads these days, right? How many of you have seen a million threads on Twitter these days instead of, just a regular standalone post? Why? Because you get the meat of the information without needing to actually click off Twitter. So Twitter is prioritizing the Twitter thread. This is zero-click content. So the same thing is true on LinkedIn. That's why you see people now using all 3,000 characters on LinkedIn. On Instagram, they don't allow you to easily link out to things, right? All of these platforms want us to stay on their platform as long as possible. It's good for the platform, but it's also good for all of us. And we're now getting conditioned to want information immediately and not have to go click off platform to go consume it somewhere else, right? This is a game changer. And it's not just me or, other marketers saying this. There was a conference recently where a Google executive was there, and he, in an offhanded comment that ended up getting reported by TechCrunch, so I'm sure he got his hand slapped because I don't think they were ready to talk about this yet, but he mentioned that Google is closely monitoring a new situation, which is that they're finding that almost 40% of Gen Z no longer goes to Google to search things. They just go to TikTok or Instagram to look up what it is they want because they get the information immediately in a visual or a video format, right? Really, really easy to consume. So that's what zero-click content is. It's all-encompassing, both search and social media. And the way that all of us market our businesses need to adapt to this new reality.
Okay, so speaking of adapting, let's say you work for a firm, for a CMO, for somebody who is not really into change. How do you explain this concept to them? How do you take this back to your office on Wednesday or on Thursday when you're back and talk to them about this?
That's a good question, and one I'm sure many of you have. And a big part of it is attribution, right? If you are helping to market a business and you're used to being able to say, we, from our most recent social media activity, have gotten 10 blog post clicks. Like, you can quantify that because you're sharing the link. It's scary to all of a sudden say, well, just give away the information of the blog post in the post itself. But let me show you a couple examples here. So, not to pick on Barron's, I don't know if you can actually even see that, but this is a social media post that Barron's did recently, and the title of the article was "A 5-Point Social Media Plan for Your Firm." When I took this screenshot, there was no likes and no comments on this post whatsoever, right? And for many of you, you probably wouldn't click on it because it doesn't specifically say what you're going to learn if you read it, who it's targeting, what kind of firms are they talking about, is it, you get the idea. It's not very specific. Contrast that with this series of posts from a woman who was trying to help normal business owners understand why so many of Gen Z are using TikTok to search for businesses. And what she did was, rather than just say, I have a whole blog post or a video that's going to teach it to you, she broke down her content into the most salient points in this Twitter thread. And then at the very end, she made a clip of her full 30-minute workshop. And it's just a 2-minute clip that she also shared both on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you look at the engagement on these posts, you're going to see, 49,000 likes and 2,000 reshares, because the content, the meat of the presentation is right there. So I think a part of convincing people is trying it and showing them the difference in the results that you're going to get. So again, this zero-click content is content that's offering standalone value with no click needed. It doesn't cost you anything to do this.
Okay, so since there isn't a link necessarily to click on, what are you tracking analytics-wise? How can you, point to page views, or what are you telling other people, like, hey, this is working because look at this metric?
Yes, it's a great question. And something to think about is, I don't want people to leave here thinking you can never share a link. So I think I have an example. One of these ones. Well, we'll go back. But the whole idea is that you take something that you already have, so a blog post, a video, and you're summarizing it into key points, and then you're sharing those key points to entice people, only the right people, to make that click, right? So, for instance, let's say you did have a blog post on when's the earliest you can claim Social Security, but you also in that blog post answered questions like, can I continue to work when I take Social Security? Something we can see a lot of people are searching. You might give them the answer, like yes, but now they need to go into your post to get the rest of the meat, the rest of the information. So I'm not saying that links are bad. I'm just saying that just sharing something like, hey, check out my latest blog post on market volatility is not going to get you the clicks that you want. Now, when it comes to things like a podcast, and I'm sure many of you here have podcasts and love them, you can do things like, instead of just putting it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, put it on YouTube. Record the video to go with the audio. There was a report just this past spring that showed that 24% of people they surveyed preferred YouTube over any other way to listen to their podcast. So it was even more popular than Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And because YouTube is the second largest search engine, if you have a podcast episode on Social Security benefits, can you work, can you not work, someone can actually search that on YouTube and end up on your podcast, which they're not going to do as easily on Spotify. We all know how terrible the Apple Podcast search function is, so definitely not there.
So let's say you already have that podcast or like an amazing library of content. Can you take this marketing strategy and retrofit what you already have to work with this? Or is it like you have to create everything new from scratch?
No, absolutely. Remember, the whole idea of this is just that it's content that offers standalone value. So one of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of businesses make, actually, they have great content. They're terrible about promoting it. Like, I'm sure for some of you here, you create a piece of content and you share it multiple times over 1 week, the week you launch it. So you like create a great blog post or a video or a podcast, and that week you post it on all the channels, and maybe you make a little clip about it, but then you don't go and reshare it again 6 months later or 12 months later, where oftentimes it would really apply again. So getting in the habit of going back through your archives and looking at what you can reshare using this strategy is a great, I mean, if you leave here today and do one thing, I would do that. Go through your list of all the content you already have. What blog posts could you pull out 5 salient tips and make a great Twitter thread? What blog posts do you have where you could create a quick 2-minute YouTube video and put it on all your channels? So repurposing what you already have is 100% an excellent strategy. And I actually find that people spend 80% of the time creating the content and only 20% of the time promoting it. And that is a huge, huge mistake. If you, not that you're going to do this, but if you were to go back and look at, my own LinkedIn or Twitter activity, you'll see like every 4 or 6 months, some of my most popular posts get reshared. And they're just as popular, if not more so, the second time around. I have new followers. People don't remember what any of us said 6 months ago. So it's a good strategy.
So it has a longer shelf life than you might think.
100%.
So is there anybody you see today doing this particularly well? Anybody who's just nailing this marketing strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple examples in here that I just want to show. So this is from Travis, who's a CFP. This is an example. I know it's really hard to see, but it's an example of a LinkedIn post that he did, and he basically said, here's the takeaway. He gave again the value up front. But then he said, hey, if you want me to give you like the whole big long article on it, comment below and I'll send it your way. That was a good strategy. He got 92 comments on that. Emily Binder, who's here somewhere at this conference, she did a great thing. If you look at the way a lot of news organizations post their own content, they don't always do a great job. But she did a great job with this FA Mag piece where she summarized why women often make better investors than men. So she says women trade 23% less frequently, but outperform men by 1.3% average during bear markets. And she talks about the 4 takeaways of why. Anybody who's interested in this topic now is going to click on that post. And then I just want to give a shout out specifically to Thomas Kopelman here. He's a really interesting case study. I had a conversation with him not that long ago, and he told me that in February of this year, so many people, to take a step back, so many people had been telling him no advisors get clients from Twitter. Has anyone ever heard that before? Like, nobody gets a client from Twitter, right? So all of his target audience are tech executives and young entrepreneurs. So he was like, this is where they're hanging out, is on Twitter. So what he decided to do in February this past year was commit every single day for 30 days to do a Twitter thread and just test it and see what happened. So these are just some examples of those Twitter threads. But the results was that right now he has a 6-week wait list for his firm, just 7-8 months later, and he's onboarding one new client every 1 to 2 weeks. And his monthly subscription model, for those of you who are interested, it starts at $450 a month, goes up to $1,600 a month. And this is really amplifying the way his firm is reaching the right audience. So again, knowing your audience is crucial. Don't go out there and start tweeting necessarily, depending on who your own audience is.
So can Thomas really track back those new clients to his Twitter feed, or can he make that direct connection?
Yes, it's a great question. So he's mentioned to me that a lot of people will come forward and say, oh, I have followed you on Twitter, and then I went and listened to some of your podcast episodes, and they ended up consuming a lot of his content. One of the things to think about for all your own firms, there's 2 ways to think about people finding you. Are you discoverable, or are you searchable, right? So those are 2 different things. Searchable would be, it's easy for people to do what I call a long tail search term online and end up finding a piece of content you wrote from SEO. So, can capital gains push me into a higher tax bracket? Some of the other examples I already gave. Or financial advisor in Philly that specializes in physicians. Shout out Chad over here. Those are potentially going to let people find you online and land on your website. But for a lot of firms, they don't have that niche of content. So searchability is harder, but discoverability is easier. It's a lot easier to get active on social media and start putting things out there, commenting on strangers' posts of the people you want to connect with. I always say if you've never commented on a stranger's post, you're doing social media wrong. I mean, there's no way to get noticed by the people you want to follow you back or engage with you than for you to basically raise your hand and say, hi, it's me. The best way to do that, comment on what they share and leave them a compliment. Who doesn't like to be complimented? And then they'll eventually start to say, who is this person?
And do you find, sometimes I think with social media, when you first start posting, I mean, you don't have a lot of followers, it's a lot of crickets when you post. Should people kind of budget a certain amount of time for engagement? Should they just know, hey, if you stick with it, the followers will come? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, just posting on social media and hoping people find your content is the worst strategy ever. Yet a lot of us do it. I always equate it to, imagine if you went to a networking event and you had a big sign and it was like 5 estate planning tips you need to know. And it had great information, but you just walked around the conference holding that sign and left. And then you were like, why didn't anyone call me? That was great. It's the same thing. If you post a link on social media, it's great information, but nobody clicks on it, it's because they don't care. I mean, I hate to say it, nobody cares. So you have to make them care. And the way you do that is by engaging with them first. So I always say for every one thing you share, you should be leaving comments on 5 other people's posts. So when I wake up in the morning, I find 5 different really interesting things, at least at a minimum, sometimes 10, sometimes 15. And I don't just say like, hey, that was smart or great post. I say, oh, that's interesting, and it makes me think of article X I just read about the same topic, and these were the interesting points that I heard. You know, give them something to then respond back to, and I promise you then, if you do this regularly, when you go to post something, it's human nature. I'm going to think, oh, this person's always commenting on my stuff. I got to leave them something nice. And that is how you build those followers.
It's that give and take.
Exactly.
So, the theme of this festival is future-proof, and I'm thinking about, the concept of being prepared for the future, being future-proof. So, if we're here again next year, what do you think is going to be sort of the theme you're talking about in 12 months? What can people do today to not be behind the ball, in
Yeah.
a year's time?
It's such a good question. And I hate to say it, but I feel like, especially in our industry, there's a lot of people who need to catch up to like 2019, even before we can start talking about 2023. Maybe that's mean, but I think we all know that. And there's lots of different reasons for that. Compliance sometimes is one of them. But if, I would love to come back and be here, all of us together next year, and have so many of you coming up to me being, Samantha, I tried these 2 strategies. I gave away the value up front, and I committed to engaging with other people on social media every day. And I have 1,000 new followers, and we've gotten 10 new clients from social media, and I promise you we'd be having those conversations. So, I mean, maybe that's me avoiding the question, or maybe that's me saying, just commit to these 2 things that we know are working now, and let's come back here next year and see how they're working for everyone.
So I think something that maybe I know I would struggle with is I don't necessarily have all the skills that you might need for some of these marketing strategies. So maybe I'm not comfortable on video. Maybe I'm not a great writer. Maybe I struggle at a certain aspect of this. Like what are the skills you actually need to execute these kinds of strategies? Do you need to have a face for TV, or can you have a face for video?
Good question. And I think, I always say if I were, going to hire somebody tomorrow, a copywriter is who I would always pick over anything else, because if you can write great copy, you can tell a great story, you can communicate well, and that goes on websites, that can be scripts for video, that can be social media posts. So copywriting is a skill that I 100% would try to, hone in on. But maybe you feel more comfortable recording video, then record it, and you can repurpose that video, have somebody else transcribe it, turn it into, other pieces of content that you can use. The main thing is, when I'm saying, you do this, I don't necessarily always mean you, each of you sitting here, whether you have to hire somebody for your firm to do it, you outsource some of these things. But the main thing is that whoever is kind of owning the branding and owning what is the message and the value prop for our firm going to be, they need to be involved at some point. You can't outsource what is the top takeaways if somebody engages with your brand that you want them to feel. You need to be invested in that.
So to get into some actionable advice for people, I mean, like, what's the first thing when somebody gets back home from this conference, they're in their home office, they're back in the office with their coworkers, like, what's the first thing you want them to do? Like, number one,
Yeah,
absolutely.
100%.
Priority.
I love that question. So I would say, number one, go through and take stock of what content do you already have that you can apply this 0-click approach to. So things that, maybe there is a great blog post that you had and you spent so much time on it, or a video or a podcast, and it didn't get that much engagement. How can you now get ready to share it using this 0-click approach? Can you start creating some Twitter threads, or using all 3,000 characters on LinkedIn? And then the first time you go to share it, before you share it, do that engagement thing, right? So whether it's you or someone from your company goes and engages with a bunch of other people, then you share it. And then a strategy I like to do, or have people do when they're first getting started, is make a list of like 10 people that you're connected with, that you could send them a link to your tweet or your LinkedIn post or your YouTube video and say, hey, I just posted this and I think you or your audience would find it really valuable. Don't even ask them to retweet it or like it. Just tell them about it. And you'll find that often they will do those things, because if it is good content and you've built this good relationship with them, they'll say, oh, that is really great, and that will really help amplify it. So I try to pick like 10 people to do that with.
So, everybody's sitting here listening to this wonderful presentation, and I'm hoping that maybe they're tweeting or they're going to go home and write a LinkedIn post about it. So, let's say they said, I'm sitting at this panel with @SueSnyder and @Samantha20.
Good one.
What does that post look like? What are they sharing in it? That's just like perfect.
Yes. So it would be, what do business owners need to know about marketing in 2022? Number one, you need to engage with at least 5 other people's posts for every one thing you post yourself. Number two, zero-click content is the future of marketing, and giving away the value up front without making people click is the recipe for success. And then maybe a nice picture of us sitting here, and that would be, the 2 takeaways.
So we have just under a minute left. So really quickly, are there any books or podcasts or people you're following on Twitter, blog posts, anybody who's really describing this well that people should check out?
Thank you for asking the question, because I forgot to mention. So the term zero-click content, I did not coin that. I wish I did. It was coined by a company called Spark Toro. So they're an awesome marketing blog, and they were the ones that came up with it. I follow a lot of what they put out. I also love on Medium, they have something called Better Marketing, which is a publication where they compile kind of the best of what everybody in marketing is talking about. And then 2 of my favorite websites I go to all the time for examples are Marketing Examples, that's what it's called. And they pull from all over the internet just great examples of awesome marketing. And then I think the other one's called Really Good Emails. Is that what it's called, Susan? I think it's reallygoodemails.com. And they also basically take emails from every sector. So you can just search finance or just search tax, CPA, and they'll give you examples of awesome people's emails that have performed really well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to tell us how to take our marketing strategies out of 1999 and into the present day. It's a good song, but maybe not a great year for marketing.
Yes, thank you so much.